translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki. By practicing in this way, whether one be in the brahmachari ashram, grahastha ashram, vanaprastha ashram or sannyasa ashram, one must always realize the all-pervading presence of the Supreme Lord, for in this way it is possible to understand the absolute truth. Purport: this is the beginning of self-realization. One must first understand how Brahman is present everywhere, and how he is acting. This education is called Brahma Jigyasa, and is the real concern of human life. Without such knowledge, one cannot claim to be a human being. Rather, he remains in the animal kingdom. As it is said, Sa eva gokara. Without such knowledge, one is no better than a cow or an ass. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakham Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So just to repeat the verse, please repeat after me. By practicing in this way, whether one be in the brahmachari ashram, grahastha ashram, vanaprastha ashram, or sannyasa ashram, one must always realize the all-pervading presence of the Supreme Lord. For in this way, it is possible to understand the absolute truth. Hare Krishna. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming this morning. It's I was reflecting on Bhagavatam and the Bhagavatam class and the importance of the Bhagavatam class. And I was thinking about how in the story of Srimad Bhagavatam we have a king, an emperor, the emperor of the world. His name is Maharaj Parikshit, and he has only 7 days to live. And there's one thing that he chooses to do, and that is to sit and to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadeva Goswami. But more than that, he decides to do it in the association of devotees. He doesn't go into a corner and take the saint with him. He doesn't take him to his palace and hear Bhagavatam privately and ask his private questions. But he hears in the association of many, many other sages, saints, and aspiring devotees and devotees. And so I was reflecting on how important the Srimad Bhagavatam class is for us as sadhakas, or at least for myself, as a sadhaka, as a practicing devotee, to actually hear Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. Because in this environment, it's thick with devotion. And the assembled devotees are wanting to hear Bhagavatam and to learn more about Krishna, his pastimes, about the absolute personality, the absolute truth about Krishna. And in this environment, we can absorb more, understand more, and take more away from these classes. So, Prabhupada made 25% of the morning program, 1 hour out of the 4 hours, dedicated to Bhagavatam. So it's very important. And I was reading recently, Prabhupada was saying in one purport that in the story of Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit is fertile and Shukadeva Goswami is potent, and therefore that makes the perfect combination for the Bhagavatam to be delivered. So in this situation I can see that the audience, the devotees, are very fertile. Unfortunately, the speaker is not very potent. Of course, Prabhupada's words, the purport, is extremely potent, but my elaboration today isn't very potent. But I hope that with the blessings of the Vaishnavas, so many of you who are so much more senior than me, please give me your blessings so that we can share something this morning that can help us all in our spiritual lives. So, before I begin, I always like to, at least when I'm hearing, I like to remember where exactly we are in terms of the Bhagavatam and the story. So at the moment, of course, the wider story is of Maharaj Parikshit hearing from Shukadeva Goswami. But he is now telling, Shukadeva Goswami is telling Maharaj Parikshit of a story, of a conversation between Yudhishthira Maharaj and Narad Muni. So Yudhishthira Maharaj is gaining transcendental realization knowledge from a guru, one of his many gurus, and this today, in this situation, is Narad Muni. And in particular, Yudhishthira Maharaj has asked Narad Muni in the last chapter, in the 11th chapter, about the actual religion of a human being. And in particular, he wants to know more about the Varnashram Dharma. And therefore, we've been hearing over the past weeks and months about the concept of the Varnashram Dharma and how it's meant to function, at least in a Vedic concept. In previous classes, we've discussed about the translation of that into our modern day and age. But we've heard about, actually, what is the highest religion for a human being. And that was earlier on, in the first canto, in the second chapter. The sages in Naimisharanya, they asked Shuta Goswami, what is the highest religion for man? And in that situation, Shuta Goswami replies, Save pumsam paro dharma yato bhakti radokshaje ahaitukya pratihata yayatma suprasiddhyati. So it's explained that the highest religion for mankind is pure devotional service, is to serve the Lord, the transcendent Lord. And such service, when it is performed in a way which is uninterrupted and unmotivated, ahaituki apratihata. If it's uninterrupted and unmotivated, only then will this service satisfy the self. So the essence of Krishna consciousness is given very early on in Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's elaborated upon, of course, in many different ways through many different stories. But this is the essence, and this is what this verse is really pointing towards, the essence of human life. So Prabhupada is explaining in his purport that we don't want to be like cows and asses. Prabhupada refers to a verse in the 10th canto, the 84th chapter, Yasyatma buddhi kanupe tridhatuke swadhiya kala tridi shubhoma ijjadi yatirtha buddhi shalilena karhichij janeshu abhikeshu saeva gokhara. Prabhupada explains that one who identifies his self as the inert body composed of mucus, bile and air, who assumes his wife and family are permanently his own, who thinks an earthen image or the land of his birth is worshipable, or who sees a place of pilgrimage as merely the water there, but who never identifies himself with, feels kinship with, worships, or even visits those who are wise in spiritual truth. Such a person is no better than a cow or an ass. So in various purports, Prabhupada is always pointing towards pure devotional service. And in this verse, with the understanding is that over and above the various ashrams, whether it's the brahmachari ashram, the grihastha ashram, vanapasta ashram, or the sannyasa ashram, what's most important ultimately is serving and pleasing Lord Krishna. And this is what we see in many different situations. We see in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that whatever ashram he was in, of course he was the exemplar devotee, he was the perfect devotee, showing us all the example. But Mahaprabhu shows that whatever ashram you're in, you can preach. So, of course, when Mahaprabhu was in the Grihastha ashram, he was married to Vishnu Priya. We had the Chand Kazi, who was trying to stop the chanting of the holy names. And in that situation, Mahaprabhu initiated the first civil disobedience movement. So he would go, and he was encouraging all of his devotees to go to the streets and to chant Hare Krishna, despite there being hundreds of soldiers being there to beat, to plunder and to imprison the devotees. And Mahaprabhu was embracing the devotees. He was bowing down to them. He was garlanding the devotees. He was covering their bodies with sandalwood, anointing their bodies with sandalwood bulb. And in this way, he was encouraging everyone to engage in the chanting of Hare Krishna despite any encumbrances. And he would tell the devotees with tears in his eyes that you are my life and soul. And so, despite being a grihastha, having so many other responsibilities, Mahaprabhu was showing the example that ultimately the aim is to serve Krishna. The aim is to preach, despite any negative forces which may be coming in the way. So the Chand Kazi also was so inspired and touched by Mahaprabhu's actions and words that he also surrendered unto the Lord. And so again we see the faithful even, or fearless dedication to Krishna is what's really being preached and emphasized in this verse. We also see in the example of Srila Prabhupada that whatever situation he was in, he was preaching. He was instructed by his own spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to preach, to print books and to distribute the books, and in this way spread the holy name around. And therefore Prabhupada took this as his life and soul. And so while he was in India, he created the League of Devotees and attempted to create a movement in Jhansi, and went through so much trouble in order to do so. He was writing, editing, typing, having printed the Back to Godhead magazine and then distributing it in the hot, sweaty streets of Delhi. And so Prabhupada was going through so much trouble in order to preach, and that was as a grihastha. And then, of course, Prabhupada took Vanaprastha, and then eventually in 1959 even, took sannyas. And then when he came to New York, or went to New York even, he was also going through so much trouble. He was shopping, he was cooking, he was serving, he was cleaning up after the devotees. And that was as a sannyasi. And this was his offering, this was his service to the Lord. It was all in order to please Krishna. So whatever ashram, Prabhupada didn't think that I'm a sannyasi. I am very special. Prabhupada never thought that I'm a grihastha. I should be respected. Whatever the situation was, his mood and meditation was simply to serve. And to serve Krishna and to please Krishna. And therefore Prabhupada was exemplifying the verse which Lord Shiva speaks to Parvati. Narayana para sarver na kutascha bhibyati swarga apuvarga nurkeshu apitulyartha darshinaha. So when Maharaj Chitraketu is cursed by Parvati, Parvati is sitting on the lap of Lord Shiva, and Maharaj Chitraketu is travelling around. He by that time is very advanced in spiritual realization. He's gone through many trials and tribulations in his life. He has the association of the Lord, and then eventually he becomes quite advanced, very much advanced actually. But when he sees Parvati sitting on the lap of Lord Shiva, he laughs. And in this way he becomes, he gains the wrath of Parvati, and so she curses him. But Maharaj Chitraketu very humbly accepts this curse, bows down and leaves. And so Shiva and Parvati have a very interesting conversation. Lord Shiva is explaining the nature of Vaishnav, how he's very tolerant, and how actually Maharaj Chitraketu is very advanced, and therefore actually Parvati shouldn't have cursed him. And so in this verse, Lord Shiva explains to Parvati that a devotee doesn't care what situation he finds himself in, whether he is in heaven, whether he's in hell, or whether he's on earth. Whatever situation he's in, he sees all as the same. Api tulyartha darshanaha. Darshanaha he sees, api tulyartha. He sees them all as equal. Because a devotee's meditation is simply to serve and simply to please Krishna. And so in terms of Mahaprabhu's associates, we see many, many elevated devotees. We see devotees such as Srivas Thakur, such as Lord Nityananda, such as Maharaj Pratrapudra, Ramananda Rai, who's one of Mahaprabhu's most closest associates, and they're all grahastas. And at the same time, we see so many in the renounced order. Of course, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, Swarup Damodar Goswami, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they're all in the renounced order of life. And so, again and again, what we understand is that whatever ashram we find ourselves in, the essence is simply to serve. I was actually just having a conversation with Sri Prabhu, and he was talking about a conversation that he had with Shivram Maharaj. And Maharaj asked him he had just got married, and so the first question Maharaj asked him was, how's your grahastha ashram going? And Sri Prabhu explained, it's fine, it's good, etc. And the advice that he got was simply, whatever situation you find yourself in, just make sure that you're reading Prabhupada's books and that you're chanting nicely. And so this is a very nice meditation, that whatever situation we're in, if we have Prabhupada's books, and if we have our bead bag, then we're set. We have everything that we need in order to be Krishna conscious, which is essentially the essence of life. And how do we actually become Krishna conscious? Ultimately, it involves chanting, Shravanam Kirtanam, watering that seed of devotion. And it involves preaching. Preaching is so important. And this is what Prabhupada showed as an example. This is what Mahaprabhu showed as the example, to preach. And it ultimately is so enlivening. The marathon, I always find to be a particularly enlivening time. And there's so much mercy to be had from distributing Prabhupada's books, from going out there and preaching whatever situation we find ourselves in. And I always find that there's reciprocation. I was in Dublin for 2 weeks of the marathon, and I'd been there for about a week. I was with Amit and Jasper Pruis, and we hadn't had any problems from the police or any authorities, and I thought this is pretty good. I was pretty happy. But then suddenly on a Saturday morning, we were there for 2 Saturdays, Saturday the 10th of December and Saturday the 17th of December. But on the 17th we were going to fly, so the day was going to be cut short. So this was the one Saturday that I was going to have, and of course we all know that Saturdays are the best day to distribute books. So the police suddenly comes along at around 10 a.m. in the morning, and the policeman starts asking me all sorts of questions, asks me for ID, and he's giving me a hard time, and basically says that I have to leave the street. And at 10 a.m. in the morning, that's exactly what you don't want to hear. So I carry on distributing books. The policeman goes, and I carry on distributing. And then he comes back, and he's looking very angry, and he's saying, "Why are you still here?" So I said to him, "Well, there's no reason for me to leave. We have permission. We're Hare Krishnas. We've been doing this for 35 years. He was quite a new police officer, so he didn't know us, and so he again asked me to leave. And then I said, "Okay, well, I'll phone the police station, and I'll have a word with them." So I phoned the police station, and they said that they'd get back to me. And then the policeman came back again, and he basically said that if I didn't leave, then he'd arrest me. So eventually that made me go to the police station. I waited there, had to wait for half an hour, and eventually they gave me the all clear. So then I came back, and by that time it was around 12 o'clock. And I'm looking at the watch thinking I've just wasted an hour and a half on a Saturday morning. And I've distributed nowhere near as many books as I wanted to, and it's really disheartening. And then half an hour later, maybe 15 minutes later, someone comes up to me, and he's asking me what I have, and I show him Prabhupada's books. He's a young, scruffy-looking Irish man, probably around 20, 25. His name's Oishin, and he's very interested. He's heard of Prabhupada's books before, and he wants to know more. He's read some of the small books. I think he had read Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, and he's really excited. And that's exactly what you like to hear. He said, "How much? How much for these books?" I had a Bhagavad Gita and a Veda in my hand. And I said, "We just ask people to be generous." And he said, "Well, I've only got 10 euros. Is that enough?" "That's probably not enough even for one book." And I said, "Well, maybe if you can give 20, then that would be perfect." So, "Okay," he said, "I'll go to the cash machine." So he went to the cash machine, and then he gave me 20 euros. And when he came back, he saw that I had many other books on display. I had the Srimad Bhagavatam, I had some smaller books like Higher Taste and Chant and Be Happy. And he said, wow, you've got so many more books. So he took the Veda and he took the Gita, and he said, how much for one of each of these books? And that for me was like, wow, that's exactly what you want to hear. And so I said, well, just be generous. And he said, well, how about if I give you 50 euros? So if I give you 30 more, I'll take one more of each of these. So he wanted a Bhagavatam, Higher Taste, I think I had Perfection of Yoga, and a Chant and Be Happy. So I said, okay, fine, no worries, that's fine. And then I stopped, and I thought that was too easy. So I said, how about if you give 70 euros? And he said, okay. So then he went to the cash machine, and he was getting out his Lakshmi, and then I thought that was also too easy. So then I said, I went up to him, and just as a 50 euro note was coming out of the cash machine, I asked him, do you have 100 euros you could give? And he said, pulled out some money out of his pocket. He said, yeah, actually, I've just got out just about 100 euros. So he gave me 100 euros very happily. And I thought, wow, okay, it was amazing. So I gave him a book of each, and I gave him a couple of sets I gave him maybe 5 extra Gitas. I said, give these out to your friends for Christmas. And I gave him an extra Bhagavatam. And it was a very, very wonderful interaction. And I just saw how Krishna was reciprocating. We'd been through trouble. The police had tried to arrest and then turf us off the street. But by being determined and by trying, Prabhupada was reciprocating, and I really felt that. But I took his contact details, actually. And by chance, I had taken a Bhagavatam set to Ireland as well. And I didn't know who I'd give it to, but I thought I'd find someone. So on the penultimate day, on the evening, we were leaving on the Saturday, so on the Friday evening, I emailed him and said, I've got a Bhagavatam set. This is a set of 30 books. This is Prabhupada's magnum opus. It's some amazing books. I think you'll love them. Do you want them? And he replied straight away saying, yes, I'd love to have them. How can I get them, and when can I have them? So I replied back. I phoned him up and I said, come tomorrow morning. I'm leaving tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock. Come tomorrow morning and pick up the set. And I asked him for 100 euros. So he came the next day. He actually came around 4:30, just in time. He took the Bhagavatam set, and he took an SSR which was lying around, and he took a few other books. He gave 130 more euros and went away very happily. And I'm still in touch with him. So the streets are an amazing place, and there's some amazing interactions and some amazing people out there, and they're just there to be brought back to Prabhupada's lotus feet, and to serve Radha Gokulananda, Radha Shyam Sundar. So this is the essence of Krishna consciousness, and this is what Prabhupada is emphasizing so much to us all. Ultimately, the essence of any ashram, and it's something that we emphasize in the sannyasa ashram, but it's common to all ashrams, is Gopi Bharta Pada Kamleor Das Das Anudas. We have to become the servant of the servant of the servant. And the servant of the devotees, or the potential devotees who are out there. The material conception is to become the master of the master of the master. This is what everyone wants to be. But our aim is the opposite. And so Prabhupada explains in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita that in spiritual life, material conceptions are turned upside down. The material conception is I am the controller and I am the enjoyer. This is what everyone wants. However, in spiritual life, we understand that Krishna is the controller and Krishna is the enjoyer. And this is emphasized, this principle is emphasized in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's, of course, a wonderful conversation between Ramananda Rai and Mahaprabhu in the 8th chapter of the Madhya Leela. And so in this situation, we find that Mahaprabhu is suggested to meet Ramananda Rai by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And so as Mahaprabhu is traveling, he reaches Vidyanagar. It's Vidyanagar, right? He reaches Vidyanagar, and that's where Ramananda Rai lives. And so he meets Ramananda Rai, and they have some amazing conversations. And so Mahaprabhu asks Ramananda Rai about the ultimate goal of life. What is the ultimate goal of life? And Ramananda Rai gives answer after answer after answer. And so at each answer, Mahaprabhu explains, Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. So I want everyone to repeat this, and we're going to make it a little interactive this morning. Everyone repeat, Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. So, Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. Okay, so nice and loud. Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki. Okay, so when I say 1, 2, 3, you have to say Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. So I'm going to be Ramananda Rai, and you're going to be Lord Chaitanya. So Lord Chaitanya says to Ramananda Rai, Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. So when Lord Chaitanya asks, what is the ultimate goal of life? Ramananda Rai's first answer is the Varnashram system. The Varnashram system is the ultimate goal of life. If one follows one's prescribed duty even. If one is a brahmachari, he's a good brahmachari and follows the rules and regulations of that ashram as I described earlier in this chapter. If one is a grahastha, one has to follow those rules and regulations. If one is a vanaprastha, sannyasi, one has to follow those rules and regulations. And in that way, one will perfect their life. However, Ramananda Rai replies, 1, 2, 3, Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. So Ramananda Rai has to go further. Lord Chaitanya says, no, this is not the highest principle, this is not the ultimate goal of life. I know you can go further, so go further. So then Ramananda Rai replies that if one offers all of the fruits of one's activities to Krishna, then that is the ultimate goal of life. That will lead to the essence of perfection. So this is basically Nishkam Karma Yoga. So we have to be detached from the fruits of our results. And in that way, we can ultimately become Krishna conscious. However, also to this response, Lord Chaitanya replies, 1, 2, 3, Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. So Lord Chaitanya also rejects this principle, saying that there is something higher. Ramananda Rai, tell me what is higher than this. Ramananda Rai then replies that to give up one's occupational duty within the Varnashram system, this is the essence of perfection. So he corroborates this by quoting Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam braja. Give up all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. He's emphasizing the principle because in Nishkam Karma Yoga one is detached from the results of one's activities, but they may still be attached to the activity itself. So Ramananda Rai is going one step further by saying become detached from the actual activity itself. And in that way simply work for Krishna, do whatever Krishna wants one to do. And in that way, that is pure Krishna consciousness. However, Lord Chaitanya says, 1, 2, 3, Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. This is still external. This is not pure. Therefore, tell me more, Ramananda Rai. So Ramananda Rai replies that higher than karma yoga, higher than acting in Krishna consciousness, is devotional service alongside jnana yoga. Devotional service mixed with empiric knowledge. So if one is cultivating an understanding of Krishna of the absolute truth, then this is higher. So he corroborates this by explaining 1854 in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahma bhuta prasannatmana sochati na kankshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. So he explains that actually cultivating transcendental knowledge of the Supreme is higher. However, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu responds in the same way. He says, 1, 2, 3, Eho bhaiya aage kaho aar. He says, no, this is also external. This is not pure. And then Ramananda Rai actually really gets into the interesting concepts. Again, he doesn't hear, so your role is now over. Mahaprabhu doesn't say Eho Bhaya Aage Ka Hawar anymore, because Ramananda Rai explains that higher than this is pure devotional service without any tinge of impurity, without any aspect of karma, yoga, or jnana. No impurity. So Ramananda Rai explains that first one practices as a sadhaka, he practices regulated devotional service, and then comes to the stage of spontaneous devotional service. And this is based on one's greed. He says, Tatra lolyam api ekam mulyam. That greed is the one price that one has to pay for spontaneous devotional service. And Mahaprabhu now begins to smile. He likes this answer. But still he says, Eho hoy aage ka hawar. So this is true, you're right, this is the highest, but please go further, give me more. So then Ramananda Rai says that the dasya ras is higher. So spontaneous devotional service is, we perform devotional service in practice, spontaneous devotional service, without any impurities. He goes further to explain that the dasya ras is higher. So devotional service with a mood of serving the Supreme Lord as a servant. Of course, we, as Vaishnavas, as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we ignore the Shantaras, because even the concept of Shantaras is something which we don't find to be really having a relationship with Krishna, and therefore it's something that we put aside. So in response to Ramananda Rai explaining the Dasya Ras to be higher, Mahaprabhu says, yes, Ehu hoy, kichu aage aar. He says, what is next? What is more than the Dasya Ras? So Ramananda Rai explains that higher than the Dasya Ras is, anyone? Sakhya Ras, yes. Because he explains that the Dasya Ras has an element of fear. However, in the Sakhya Ras, one sees oneself equal to the Lord. And therefore, this brings a very wonderful, very beautiful relationship, which is devoid of any kind of respect or reverence. And therefore, it's a much closer relationship. So again, Mahaprabhu says that this is great, however, there's more. And Ramananda Rai, I know you know more, so please explain. So Ramananda Rai goes further, and finally he explains that the conjugal ras, Madhurya ras, is the highest. This is the highest thing. He explains that we're getting progressively better. The conjugal attachment for Krishna is the topmost position in love of Godhead. He explains that within the conjugal ras, the paraki above is the highest. And the gopis have this mood of serving Krishna and giving their life and soul in such a powerful way that Krishna has to say to the gopis, Na pariham, I cannot repay you. And in this way, they become Krishna's property, but Krishna becomes their property. And therefore, this is the highest form of love of Godhead. And so Mahaprabhu is becoming very emotional at this stage, and he asks Ramananda Rai to continue and say more and explain more. And in this way, Ramananda Rai continues to go into more and more detail, explaining about the topmost, the height of the conjugal ras, which it comes in the form of Radharani, and then explains much more about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So in this way, Ramananda Rai and Lord Chaitanya have this conversation which progressively allows us to understand the various steps of Krishna consciousness. But the process that Prabhupada has given actually almost jumps through all of the steps which Ramananda Rai goes through. At no point does Prabhupada emphasize for us to perform devotional service mixed with karma yoga, or devotional service mixed with jnana yoga, or devotional service mixed with mystic yoga. Prabhupada is giving us the highest thing. So whoever we are, whatever background we come from, whatever our previous life, so to speak, may be, Prabhupada is encouraging us to perform pure devotional service, straight off. And so we're so fortunate to be in this situation. But ultimately, what Ramananda Rai is explaining is that by performing devotional service and by performing pure devotional service, we can almost purchase Krishna. Krishna says ultimately to the gopis that I cannot repay you. And so similarly, we understand that by preaching this Krishna consciousness movement, we can actually have Mahaprabhu come to us and say that I cannot repay you. And when Mahaprabhu does that, then he takes us by the shika, or by the hair, I suppose. I'm not quite sure how that works, but he takes us by the shika and takes us back to the spiritual world. And this is our reward for trying to give our lives to Krishna and to the process of Krishna consciousness.